The billionaire Mr. Harrison Cole was a man who lived in a world of glass walls and iron gates. People admired him, envied him, and some even feared him. But if there was one thing everyone knew about Harrison, it was this. He trusted no one, not his business partners, not his so-called friends, and certainly not the people who worked for him. And maybe he had a reason for that. For decades, Harrison had seen the ugly side of human nature. People smiled at him, praised him, even called him their dearest friend. But behind those polished words, there was always a hand reaching out for something. Money, power, a favor that could change their lives, but drain his. He had been betrayed more than once, and each betrayal left a scar so deep that it hardened him further. So when Gloria, his loyal maid of almost 10 years, shyly approached him one evening with a simple request, Harrison's guard instantly went up. "Sir," Gloria said softly, her hands nervously wringing the hem of her apron, "would it be all right if my son, Marcus, came here after school sometimes, just until I finish my workday? I don't want him wandering the streets alone." Harrison's cold, gray eyes studied her for a long moment. Gloria had been nothing but loyal, hard-working, and respectful. She never asked for favors, never overstepped her role. She was the kind of employee anyone would be grateful for. And yet, the very fact that she was now asking something, anything, made Harrison suspicious. Her son, a 12-year-old boy. What harm could he possibly do? But Harrison didn't believe in blind trust. He gave a short nod. "Fine, the boy can stay. But he's your responsibility." Gloria's eyes lit up with gratitude. She thanked him over and over, promising Marcus would never disturb or trouble anyone. The next day, after school, the boy arrived. Marcus was not what Harrison expected. He wasn't loud, reckless, or careless like many children his age. He was polite, quiet, and oddly thoughtful. He greeted the staff respectfully, carried his school bag neatly, and when he was told to sit in the corner with his homework, he did so without complaint. Still, Harrison watched him. It wasn't the boy himself that worried him, but what the boy represented. Children were curious. They wandered into rooms they shouldn't, touched things they didn't understand, and sometimes, without realizing it, made costly mistakes. And if Marcus was anything like the rest of the world, he might see the billionaire's wealth as an opportunity. That night, as the house grew silent, the mansion's grand library became Harrison's refuge. The tall oak shelves stretched to the ceiling, lined with first editions and priceless collections. The crackling fireplace painted the walls in shades of gold and amber, and the billionaire sank into his leather chair, the scent of aged paper filling his lungs. It was in this library that Harrison often drifted into short naps, though his mind never fully rested. Even in sleep, he was alert. Even in silence, his suspicion whispered. And then Marcus walked in. The boy stepped softly, almost timidly, his sneakers making barely a sound against the polished wooden floor. He clutched a book in his small hands, his head tilted slightly as he scanned the room. His mother had told him to stay put in the kitchen until she finished cleaning, but perhaps his curiosity had led him here. From beneath his half-lowered eyelids, Harrison noticed. The billionaire's sharp mind began to churn. This is my chance. He leaned back, adjusted his posture, and let his eyelids close fully. His breathing slowed until it mimicked the steady rhythm of sleep. Let's see what this boy really does when he thinks no one is watching, Harrison thought. Would Marcus wander through the library, touching the priceless books and artifacts? Would he peek into the drawers, perhaps looking for money or valuables? Would he even dare to approach the old man himself, searching for loose change in his coat pocket? In that moment, Harrison was not just a billionaire testing a child. He was a man testing humanity itself, hoping, perhaps against hope, that this boy would prove him wrong. The fire crackled. The air grew still. And Harrison Cole, the man who trusted no one, pretended to sleep, waiting to see what Marcus would do. At first, Marcus stood frozen at the door of the grand library, his small frame almost swallowed by the towering doorway. He hesitated, gripping the strap of his worn school bag with both hands. For a moment, he wasn't sure if he should step inside at all. The room didn't feel like it belonged to him, or even to his world. The library was unlike anything Marcus had ever seen. The walls stretched impossibly high, lined with shelves upon shelves of books. Golden frames gleamed in the soft glow of the chandelier, and polished ornaments, vases, globes, and figurines sat neatly on tables as though placed there by an artist. To a boy who came from a modest neighborhood, where cracked walls and squeaky floors were normal, this room was nothing short of magical. To Marcus, it didn't look like a library. It looked like a treasure chest. He stepped in slowly, his sneakers tapping gently against the wooden floor. Each sound echoed back at him, making him more cautious. He glanced at Mr. Harrison Cole slouched in his leather chair, the man's chest rising and falling the rhythm of sleep, or what Marcus thought was sleep. In truth, Harrison was wide awake. His eyelids remained shut, but every sense was alert. His mind sharpened like a hawk's, waiting, watching, testing. On the mahogany desk just a few steps away lay two items Harrison had deliberately placed in plain sight: a thick, black leather wallet, fat with bills, and beside it, a gleaming gold watch. Both shimmered temptingly in the firelight. The trap had been set. Harrison's lips curled ever so slightly at the corners. This is it, he thought. Let's see what the boy does when temptation is staring him in the face. Would Marcus's hands tremble with greed? Would his curiosity get the better of him? Would he prove that, no matter how innocent he looked, he was just another person ready to snatch what didn't belong to him? Marcus's eyes landed on the desk. His steps grew slower. His head tilted slightly. For a moment, Harrison thought he saw it. The look, that glint in eye that always came before someone reached out for wealth. The boy inched closer, standing now just a foot away from the desk. The firelight cast a glow on his face, showing every flicker of hesitation. His small hand twitched near his side, and Harrison's heart thudded with a mixture of certainty and disappointment. This is it, the billionaire thought, almost bitterly. He'll go for it. But then Marcus didn't. Instead, his gaze drifted downward, away from the golden watch and the wallet bursting with bills. His eyes fell on the bottom shelf of the grand bookcase that sat just behind the desk. There, tucked neatly, was a small collection of books meant for children. Stories with colorful spines, fairy tales, and simple novels that most wealthy families kept for visiting guest children. Marcus bent down slowly, his knees touching the carpet. He ran his small fingers along the spines of the books, as though each one were a precious stone. Finally, he pulled one out, a storybook with a faded cover and worn edges. Carefully, as if the book might crumble in his hands, Marcus opened it. His lips moved softly as he traced the words with his finger, sounding them out. His voice was barely above a whisper, yet full of wonder. "If only I could read all these one day," he murmured, almost like a prayer. The sincerity in his tone was undeniable. There was no greed, no hunger for riches, only a longing for knowledge, for the worlds hidden inside those pages. From his chair, Harrison's eyebrows lifted slightly. His breath caught in his throat. This was not what he expected at all. He had set a trap, certain that the boy would reach for money or gold, because that's what people always did. They always wanted something from him. They always showed their true colors the moment they thought no one was watching. But Marcus was different. The boy didn't even glance back at the wallet or the watch. He didn't stretch out greedy hands. Instead, he sat cross-legged on the carpet, flipping through the book with a smile so pure that it softened the hard edges of the entire room. His eyes lit up not at the sight of wealth, but at the wonder of stories, at the thought of learning and reading more than life had ever given him. And for the first time in a long while, Harrison felt something stir inside him, something unfamiliar, a flicker of surprise, a flicker of hope. Could it be, Harrison thought, his suspicion wavering, that this boy is not like the others? The fire crackled, filling the silence. Harrison kept perfectly still, though his mind was racing. He had spent years building walls, guarding his fortune, distrusting every soul who came too close. And yet here was a poor Maid son, surrounded by temptations, and all he wanted was a book. It was such a simple choice. But to Harrison Cole, it was extraordinary. And in that quiet, golden-lit library, the billionaire realized that this little test was already starting to challenge everything he thought he knew about people. Minutes ticked by in that quiet library. The crackling of the fireplace was the only sound that filled the grand room. Harrison, with his eyes shut, continued to wait, expecting the temptation of gold and cash to eventually claim the boy's attention. But it never did. Marcus never looked twice at the wallet or the watch. Instead, his small hands reached for something much humbler, a simple notebook and pencil lying on the corner of the desk. They weren't shiny or valuable, but to Marcus, they were treasures of another kind. He sat down on the carpet, cross-legged, the notebook resting on his knees. His tongue peeked out slightly in concentration as he carefully pressed the pencil to the page. His handwriting was a little crooked, the letters uneven, but his face lit up with purpose. He wasn't scribbling random lines or doodles like many children might. He was writing. From his chair, Harrison's ears picked up faint whispers. Marcus was mumbling as he wrote, as though speaking his thoughts aloud helped them flow onto the page. One day, the boy whispered, "I'll become a teacher. I'll help kids like me. Mama works so hard, but I'll make her proud. I'll show her that her son could become somebody in this big world." Harrison's heart clenched. For years, the billionaire had heard people's private wishes, most of them selfish, shallow, dripping with greed. But here was a child, barely 12, pouring his soul into a notebook, not wishing for toys, not begging for wealth, not even dreaming of luxury, but dreaming of a future where he could serve others. The billionaire's chest felt heavy in a way he couldn't explain. A warmth spread through him, but it wasn't comfort. It was something sharper, something that tugged at old wounds. Become a teacher? Harrison thought. This boy doesn't even have proper shoes, and yet his dreams are bigger than this mansion. He remembered his own childhood, cold, lonely, shaped by a father who valued money over moments. Harrison had grown up thinking that to survive in this world, you had to be ruthless, hard, unshakable. That's why he built walls of suspicion around himself. That's why he believed kindness was weakness, and trust was a fool's gamble. Yet here was Marcus, born into poverty, with every reason to crave wealth, and still he chose dreams over greed. Harrison's fingers twitched against the armrest of his chair. He wanted to open his eyes. He wanted to see the boy's face more clearly, to study the determination in those young eyes. But something stopped him. Perhaps he feared that if Marcus knew he was being watched, the spell would break. And then something happened that froze him completely. Marcus closed the notebook gently and set it aside. His eyes wandered toward the leather chair where Harrison slept. He studied the man for a long moment. His expression softened, and then, in the quietest, most tender gesture, Marcus stood up. He walked over slowly, his small footsteps padding against the carpet. In his hands, he clutched a blanket that had slipped from the billionaire's lap. With the gentleness of a child caring for a grandfather, Marcus lifted it and tucked it back around Harrison's shoulders. "Good night, sir," Marcus whispered, his voice full of genuine care. And then came words that struck the billionaire harder than any business loss, harder than any betrayal. "I hope God keeps you healthy, because Mama says you're the reason we have food on our table." Harrison's breath caught in his throat. He had expected the boy to be selfish, to be careless, maybe even greedy. He had expected betrayal in its smallest form. But what he found instead was gratitude. A child who saw him not as a walking wallet, not as a rich man to envy, but as the reason his mother's hard work had dignity. Those words pierced through the billionaire's armor. They slipped past the walls of suspicion he had built and struck directly at his soul. For a long moment, Harrison couldn't even think. His heart felt like it had been squeezed, as though all the years of cynicism and bitterness were suddenly cracking open. He had been so sure the world had no more innocence, no more purity left in it. And yet, here was proof, standing in front of him in the form of a 12-year-old boy who only wanted to dream, to love his mother, and to wish well for the very man who doubted him. The billionaire fought to keep his breathing steady, his eyes still closed. He didn't want to reveal himself, not yet. But inside, something shifted. For years, Harrison Cole had measured people by what they wanted from him. Now, for the first time in a very long time, he saw someone who wanted nothing but goodness for himself, for others, and even for Harrison. And in that simple whisper, Good night, sir. The billionaire felt something he hadn't felt in decades. Hope. The morning sunlight streamed into the mansion, spilling through the tall glass windows and painting the study in warm shades of gold. Mr. Harrison Cole sat behind his heavy oak desk, fingers steepled together, his mind still replaying the night before. He hadn't slept much. Every time he closed his eyes, he heard the boy's voice. One day, I'll become a teacher. I'll make Mama proud. Good night, sir. Those words echoed in his heart, stirring emotions he thought he'd buried decades ago. At precisely 8 o'clock, Harrison rang the small brass bell on his desk. Within moments, Gloria appeared at the door. Her face, usually calm and steady, looked uneasy. She wiped her hands nervously on her apron, her eyes darting around the room before settling on him. "You called for me, sir?" she asked cautiously. Harrison studied her for a long moment, his sharp eyes betraying none of the thoughts swirling in his mind. Finally, he spoke, slowly, deliberately, as though choosing each word with care. "Gloria, tell me, what does your boy want to be when he grows up?" For a second, Gloria froze. The question seemed so out of place, so unexpected, that she feared it was a trick. She clasped her hands tightly in front of her, her heart racing. Did Marcus do something wrong? Did he wander where he shouldn't have? But then, as the question sank in, her face softened. Her lips curved into the kind of smile only a proud mother could wear. Her eyes lit up, shining with both pride and a touch of sadness. "Marcus," she said quietly, "wants to be a teacher, sir." Harrison's gaze sharpened. He leaned forward slightly, listening intently as Gloria continued, her voice trembling with emotion. "He says education is the most powerful thing a person can have. He tells me that if children like him can learn, they can change their whole lives. I tell him, 'Marcus, we don't have money for much schooling beyond the basics.' But he never stops dreaming." Her words carried both pride and pain. Pride in her son's ambition, and pain in knowing that the path ahead for him was lined with obstacles she couldn't clear. For the first time in years, Harrison felt something stir deep in his chest. A pang of guilt. He thought of the endless money sitting in his accounts, of the luxuries he surrounded himself with, compared to this boy who dared to dream of teaching but had nothing to fuel that dream. He leaned back in his chair, recalling the image of Marcus in the library. The boy had ignored a wallet stuffed with cash, had brushed past the glitter of a gold watch, and instead chose to write about dreams in a notebook. He remembered the whisper of gratitude, the blanket pulled gently over his shoulders. It was as though Marcus had slipped past the iron gates around his heart and touched something soft, something Harrison hadn't felt in decades. Gloria's eyes searched his face nervously. She had worked for him long enough to know he was not a man of idle curiosity. If he was asking about Marcus, it meant something. But what? "Sir," she added quickly, "if Marcus has bothered you, please forgive him. He's a good boy, but sometimes his curiosity." Harrison lifted a hand, silencing her. His voice, though still firm, carried a note of gentleness she had never heard before. "Your boy hasn't bothered me, Gloria. Not at all." She blinked, confused. In truth, Harrison was fighting something inside himself. For years, he had lived behind suspicion, convinced that everyone around him was waiting for their chance to take advantage. But Marcus had shown him something different, something purer. And now, looking at Gloria, he realized that behind every good child was often a good parent who sacrificed everything quietly, without applause, without reward. He studied Gloria for a moment longer, the tired lines on her face, the hands worn from years of scrubbing, cooking, cleaning. And yet, her eyes shone brightly when she spoke of her son's dreams. For the first time in years, the billionaire felt his icy heart begin to soften. He cleared his throat and leaned back in his chair, trying to mask the emotions threatening to show on his face. "I see," he said finally, his tone softer than usual. "Your boy has big dreams." Gloria nodded, a proud smile tugging at her lips despite the worry in her eyes. "Yes, sir. Bigger than me. Bigger than what life has given us." Harrison said nothing more, but as Gloria left the study, he found himself staring out the window, deep in thought. The world had shown him countless hands reaching for his wallet, but Marcus had shown him something different, hands reaching for knowledge, for purpose, for a future. And for the first time in many years, Harrison Cole wondered if maybe, just maybe, he had been wrong about people all along. That evening, the mansion felt different. The long hallways, usually echoing with a cold stillness, carried a quiet warmth. For years, Harrison Cole had lived in this grand estate surrounded by luxury, yet untouched by laughter, untouched by love. But tonight, something stirred in him, something that made him want to break his own rules. He sat in his study, the same room where he had tested Marcus just the night before. The golden lamplight spilled across the desk, illuminating the very wallet and watch he had once used as bait. But this time they meant nothing. What mattered was the boy who would soon walk through the door. When the knock finally came, Harrison's voice was steady. "Come in." The door creaked open, and Marcus stepped inside. His small frame seemed almost swallowed by the size of the room, but his eyes, bright and curious, carried more courage than most grown men. He glanced at Harrison nervously, unsure why he had been called in. "Marcus," Harrison began, his tone firm but not unkind. "Sit down." The boy obeyed, perching on the edge of the chair across from the billionaire. Harrison leaned forward, his sharp gray eyes locking on the boy. He wasted no time. "Last night, I saw everything." Marcus's eyes widened. You were awake?" "Yes," Harrison said bluntly. "I left my wallet and watch out on purpose." "Do you know why?" The boy's throat tightened. He swallowed hard, his small hands gripping the edge of his chair. His voice trembled as he answered, "To test me, sir." For a moment, silence filled the room. The fire crackled softly in the background. The sound of flames chewing would echoing against the tall shelves of books. Harrison nodded slowly. "Yes, I wanted to see what you would do when no one was watching." He leaned back in his chair, studying Marcus. "And you pass, not in the way I expected, but in a way I'll never forget. You showed me honesty. You showed me kindness. And most of all, you showed me a dream bigger than money." Marcus blinked rapidly, not fully understanding. That was when Harrison reached into the drawer of his desk and pulled out a small white envelope. He slid it across the desk, stopping just in front of Marcus. "Open it," he said softly. Marcus's hands shook as he picked up the envelope. Carefully, he tore it open and unfolded the paper inside. His eyes scanned the words slowly, his lips parting as the truth settled in. It was a scholarship letter. Not just any scholarship, but full funding to the best private school in the city. The kind of place where doors open, where dreams could grow wings. The boy's lower lip trembled. His voice cracked as he whispered, "Sir, is this real?" Harrison's lips curved into a rare smile. "It's real, boy. Very real. And when you're ready, I'll help you go to college too. Because a young man with a heart like yours deserves every chance in this world." For a long second, Marcus couldn't speak. His chest heaved as tears welled in his eyes, spilling over and rolling down his cheeks. He clutched the letter tightly against his chest, as though it were the most precious treasure he had ever held. Just then, Gloria stepped into the room. She had been standing by the doorway, unsure whether she was allowed to enter, but unable to stop herself from listening. The moment she saw the paper in her son's hands, she covered her mouth with both hands. "Sir," she gasped, her voice breaking. "Is this... Are you..." Harrison stood and faced her. His voice carried both firmness and warmth. "Gloria, your son has something the world desperately needs. Integrity, compassion, and a vision beyond himself. I want to help him. No, I need to help him. Because investing in him is worth more than all the gold watches in this house." Gloria's tears streamed freely down her cheeks. She had worked for this man for nearly a decade, never expecting more than a paycheck, never daring to ask for anything. And now, here he was, giving her son a future she could never provide on her own. Her knees weakened, and she pressed a hand to the wall to steady herself. Thank you, sir," she whispered through sobs. But Marcus was already on his feet. The boy rushed forward, the letter still clutched in his small hands, and before Harrison could react, Marcus threw his arms around him. The billionaire stiffened at first. He wasn't used to embraces. to the warmth of human touch. For years, people had shaken his hand with ulterior motives, hugged him only to soften him for favors. But this was different. This hug was not about money, not about status, not about taking. It was about gratitude, about love, about being seen and believed in. Slowly, Harrison's arms lifted, almost awkwardly at first, but then with a steadiness that surprised even him. He returned the embrace, his chest tightening with an emotion he hadn't felt in decades. Gloria sobbed softly in the background, her hand pressed against her heart, watching the impossible scene unfold. And in that moment, Harrison Cole, the man who thought he had everything, realized the truth. For years, he had invested in stocks, in real estate, in ventures that multiplied his fortune. But none of it had ever filled the emptiness inside him. None of it had given him the warmth he felt in this single moment. Because true wealth wasn't in the vaults of banks or the shine of gold. It was here, in the dreams of a boy who wanted to teach, in the sacrifices of a mother who worked silently for years, in the simple, pure love of people who had nothing to give but their honesty and their hope. Harrison's voice cracked as he whispered, almost to himself, Maybe this is what I've been missing all along. Marcus hugged him tighter, and for the first time in years, the billionaire didn't feel the weight of suspicion. He didn't feel the need to guard his heart. He simply felt human. And as the fire burned warmly in the study, Harrison Cole understood something he would never forget. The greatest investment of all is not in riches, but in people.